Greetings, Doom fans, and welcome to another edition of the Collapse Cafe here on the Doomstead Diner. Today, I'm welcoming Norman Patchett again, and Norman wrote the book The End of More. We've had numerous good conversations with Norman about various Collapse topics. Today, we're also joined by another blogger who hasn't visited with us in a while, but we have talked with on other occasions, Jason Heppenstall. Jason runs the blog 22 Billion Energy Slaves. He also has another blog, Foxwood, and then he has a fictional blog that he's been writing a novel on called Seed of Mars. And also, to wrap it up, is my co-host, Monsta, from the Diner, and myself, Ari. And today, because all of my guests and my co-hosts are UK-based, Britain, England, well, however you want to call it, has so many names. And we are going to be talking about issues that are specific mainly to England, but also to the European Union, and I'm pretty sure we will digress into other areas that are related to our current energy problems and so forth that all of us are concerned with, monetary problems. So the first thing, though, that we want to talk about is the politics, a change in the attitudes and political spectrum that's going on there. Jeremy Corbyn, who is a left-leaning type of politician, has been getting a lot of play in the news, even here in the United States. So I've been curious as to how that's playing out over there in the UK. Norman, you want to give us your thoughts on Jeremy?
Well, I don't think he's left-leaning. I think he's totally to the left. I mean, he's of the left, or seems to be. He seems to be living in a dream world where anything he wants can be put into practice simply by throwing money at it or printing money or something of that sort. He doesn't seem to be linked to the problem of energy, which we're all locked into. He seems to think that. If the politics of the left say they want free university places for all, or free healthcare for all, or anything else, then he can just appear, and that seems to be his policy.
Yeah, I think that type of socialist solution. Is gaining a certain amount of popularity on one side, while on the other side you have, plenty of neo-Nazi type of parties that are cropping up over there as well. Jason, how do you see the politics evolving here in England?
Well, I think the funny thing is that Jeremy Corbyn, although he's kind of branded as a very left-wing, loony left, if you like, by pretty much the whole press. If you look at the whole political situation over the last 20, 30 years, everything has moved so far to the right that 20 or 30 years ago he wouldn't be considered hard left. He would be kind of moderate, really. But the interesting thing is the effect that he's had on the whole discussion, the whole political situation over here is quite astonishing, really. I haven't seen anything like that in many years. I mean, everybody seemingly was out to get him, including the so-called liberal media, of even the Guardian or the Independent or whatever. They ran article after article attacking him, and then all of a sudden he's elected leader in a very democratic manner, and they don't know what to do with themselves. I mean, they're falling over themselves. They don't know whether to support him or try and kill him off or whatever. It's kind of interesting to watch.
I think to demonstrate how left-leaning he is, because I think this is the problem I find today. Left doesn't mean left; it means central right, and right means far right. Everything's shifted to the right. But just to give you an idea about Corbyn, he proposes things like a maximum wage, effectively done through high income tax thresholds. He wants to renationalize the railways. He wants to put rent controls in housing properties. He wants to reduce high property values and that kind of thing. The other thing that is notable about Corbyn, that's probably not familiar with a lot of people, is he does have an anti-war stance. You know, he's not a fan of the Trident nuclear program in England. He wants to put an arms embargo on Israel, and he generally does not want to get involved in the whole Syria situation. You know, so that gives you an idea of how left-leaning he is and what his attitude is to at least war in terms of foreign policy. So that's a main thing. I would agree with Jason. He's kind of been lampooned by most media outlets, and I think it's because he is quite far left in conventional politics. The other thing about him is he's not very orthodox. He doesn't fit the book. Like, he's quite different to Miliband and Cameron and all those sorts of people. He doesn't come and read off a script, which is a bit different. But I think that's a similarity to what's his face, Trump and Sanders in America. So that's a similarity that I see. The question is, do people support him? I mean, Jason, what do you think of Corbyn? Do you think he could be, if he was in power, would he do good things for England, or is he just a dreamer?
Well, I mean, for a start, he's a human being. He's not a robot like nearly all the other politicians. But you know what they say, the road to hell is lined with good intentions. I mean, I can see that if he did get power, there would be a huge power struggle, because the things that he is proposing, like spending X million, billion pounds a year on nuclear weapons, which most people agree are, you know, kind of obsolete anyway. You know, taxing the big corporations, giving people, you know, cutting back on austerity measures, that kind of thing. That's all very popular with most people, and most people now see this as a real kind of sea change in the political scene. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Labour, and I've never voted for Labour. But on the other hand, I can see how his energy has kind of fed into the whole idea that people could go out there and vote and actually get some change, because they haven't actually had that chance for about, I don't know, 30 years.
Yeah, basically since Thatcher, I would say.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's and pretty similar here in the fascist states of America as well, since the Reagan years. I mean, yeah, you know, you had Clinton in there, but even the Democrats on this side of the pond are what people call socialist and left here these days is you know, basically, you know, slightly to the right of center. You know, real socialism has long since disappeared from American soil. Okay, so you know, we've got a little layout of what the battle is there, and what the you know, what's going on the political level, but what's the drivers, right? And you know, we talked a little bit about this before, and you know, you've got Scottish secession that is brewing there. The Scots are talking about leaving the United Kingdom grouping, and then you've got the secessionary aspect of possibly the UK pulling out of the European Union. Norman, you want to start us off with talking about what some of the drivers are for those secessionary type of movements and feelings?
Well, yes, because the Scots see themselves as better off on their own now, because the economic situation of the UK will go into decline over the next 10, 20 years because we don't have the necessary energy to support a United Kingdom system. So the Scots devolve thinking that their oil will support them. And of course it won't. Oil will decline, and the Scots will, I think, be something like Greece by the time the oil runs out. The Scottish economy, if it's devolved completely from UK, will be something on the level of Greece. And the same with Corbyn. Corbyn wants a united Ireland, and it could well be that Northern Ireland will see themselves better off with ERA. As a united country, that could well happen. Whether Wales is big enough to go on its own is another matter. But in the future, that could happen, because a nation, a group of nations, can only hold together as long as their economy is strong enough to do it. If they're prosperous enough to hold together, then they will hold together. Which takes you straight into the EU. The EU was a prosperous entity as long as the prosperity was ongoing, but now prosperity is going the other way. You've got Spain, Portugal, Greece, Italy. Those southern countries are not as prosperous as they used to be, and they know it. The northern half of Europe is still reasonably prosperous, but that can't go on forever. So as prosperity fades, the concept of the EU will fade. It has to. And England and the UK will drop out of it.
One of the things that I see with this, like the drivers, you mentioned drivers and all of this, and I think from a political level, there's always been a bit of a north and a south divide in the UK, and this is quite prominent because England, I would say, is very London-centric. A lot of the economic activity takes place in London, and that's where Westminster is. So a lot of the policies that come through favor the South and London in particular. And the problem that the Scots have is they feel that their needs are not being addressed by Westminster and London. So I think this is... Yeah.
So I wasn't talking about politics, I was talking about economics.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I agree with you, but I'm just giving a backdrop to RE, and when you mentioned the drivers, I totally agree. In the long run, what you're saying is true, but I'm saying this is also a driver of why, because it's not just the secession movement, it's just like in the last election, for example, a lot of people voted for the Scottish National Party, the SNP. They didn't vote for Labour, and I think that's a clear sign that not only do they want independence, but they want their own political parties. You know, it's
their own political system.
Yeah, their own political system.
But they're equating politics with economic stability. They think they can vote prosperity into office, and it can't be done. You cannot vote prosperity into office.
Well, that is the fallacy that it goes on, I think, everywhere on the political level, which is the belief that by changing political parties and by voting this or that person into office, that you're going to be able to change the economics. I think to an extent, when times are prosperous, like you were talking about, that those changes of parties do make a difference, because it will lean towards one or the other way in terms of whether the population at large gets the surplus of the society distributed to them, or whether the surplus of the society gets focused down to individuals, corporations, etc., the wealthy. And I think that, basically what has gone on here through the prosperous times is a sieving of the wealth towards one class, while the other class was basically left hung out to dry. And now, even worse, as the surplus diminishes and as there is less to go around, it seems like even more wealth is being funneled towards the wealthy class. Jason, how do you perceive that wealth divide over in England? Is a similar sort of thing going on there as going on here with money moving towards the wealthy? And
Oh, exactly. I mean, the first thing to consider in this whole conversation is that Britain, the United Kingdom as a whole, has been in a kind of steady decline for about 100 years now, since the end of the empire. And in the last, 30 or so years, probably since Thatcher, over here it's been propped up by a number of bubbles, and also turning on, the oil spigots. We really burned through as much North Sea oil as we could, and had a few booms to enjoy in the meantime. But now, given that the energy resources are dwindling, the political situation, the power games that have been shaping the world for the last few decades, they're changing. The United Kingdom is finding itself in a situation where the richer, more powerful people are doing better than ever, at the expense of the weaker, like poorer people in the regions. I mean, in the regions of England and also in Scotland and Wales, and it's becoming more and more apparent, I think. I mean, just where I live, for example, I think it's the poorest, or the second poorest area in Britain. Is one of the poorest areas in Western Europe as a whole. I mean, there's just, a 2-minute walk from my front door here. There's food banks. There's a food bank there, and I know people that queue up there to get their food. And at the same time, you see people driving around brand new Jaguars and Mercedes and everything. So it's getting more and more difficult to disguise the disparity between the two ends of the spectrum. I think that's what we're seeing at the moment.
And just as a heads up, it's the inequality in England is actually one of the highest in Europe. It's not on the same level as the United States, but in terms of Europe, it's one of the highest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I certainly agree with Jason that your inequality is growing and growing and growing, but it's an energy deficit problem. It's not it's not a political problem. It's an energy deficit problem, because Thatcher thrived on oil. They said over the Thatcher years that wasn't she a wonderful politician? She just had this great bonus of oil as the energy force. That was it. That was the support mechanism that she was lucky enough to have, and it's gone down since now the oil is declining. Then the political system is declining. It has to.
I think one of the things...
It's the energy question, and you talked about it in a prior podcast or vidcast that we did. England basically built its power on the back of coal in the early years, and the empire grew as a result of the energy that England was able to access from coal. And then, again, you had the bonus of oil that came in later on. So at that time, it reigned supreme. And then on our side of the pond, the power of the fascist states of America in the early years, World War I, World War II, came on the back of accessing copious amounts of easily pumped up oil. And so the United States built its empire on oil as England had built its empire on coal beforehand. So kind of the question is, now that England's basically running out of oil, and we ran out of oil in the 70s, or at least cheap, easily accessible oil. Who, if anybody, can step up to the plate as a leadership, as an empire type of deal? A lot of people talk about the Chinese, the future of the Chinese as world leaders. Where do you guys see that? Jason, you want to pick up on that?
I mean, I think all bets are off. I mean, of course, it could be the Chinese, it could be the Russians, it could be the Brazilians. You just don't know at this stage because things are changing so rapidly. No, I mean, nobody who's built up a big economy, like an industrial economy, is going to fare very well in a resource-constrained future where there's hardly any energy compared to what we're used to. And let's not forget we've got like massive overcapacity of infrastructure, populations booming, etc., 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 all based on the assumption that we would have an infinite supply of energy. So I really don't know where this is going to go. I mean, my kids ask me, like, should I learn French at school? And I say, no, it's better to learn Russian or Chinese or something.
Yeah.
The question,
How old are your kids, Jason?
I've got two daughters. One is 12, the other one is 10.
Hmm.
You know, we talk about these things. We talk about the kind of stuff that I write about. So they're pretty clued up.
do they know about peak oil?
Yeah, they know all about it.
Well, that's really good because that actually is a question that's been bandied about around the blogosphere, which is how do you talk to your kids about this stuff? So actually, having someone on who has a couple of young children and how you deal with it with them. I'm interested in hearing about that stuff and talk about it more. Let me ask you a hard one because Guy McPherson recently apparently wrote a children's book to basically tell or warn children about the possibility of a human extinction coming in their lifetimes. Have you ever had that kind of discussion with your kids?
No, I haven't had that kind of discussion. I mean, I've talked to them about the kind of everyday constraints that we can expect, like less cars, fewer cars on the road, more sort of having to grow our own food, that sort of thing. I mean, that's the kind of conversations I can have. I mean, I don't agree with Guy McPherson's theory about that we're all going to suddenly die within 15 years. I mean, I don't think I could carry on living if I actually thought that was true. So I don't talk about things like that, and I find it a bit weird, the idea of writing a children's book about that. I mean,
how do your kids react to you, Jason?
Sorry?
How do your kids react to you personally?
Well, they are very interested in it and kind of excited to a certain extent.
They don't,
maybe
I mean,
they're my kids.
They don't dismiss you as crazy or anything.
No, not at all.
No, that's just your problem, Norman.
They don't know any better.
Well, my kids are much my kids are much older. I was 80 last week, so that puts my kids far older.
Yeah, I could be one of your kids.
Yeah, quite. Well, you could. My eldest daughter's nearly 60.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I've got 7 grandchildren and a great grandchild and another one on the way, and pretty much they kind of shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, "Dad's crazy, so we'll leave him to it."
Yeah.
He's harmless.
My kids are fine with it, but I tell you where it is getting difficult. Is that certainly with the 12-year-old at school, they're starting to think about careers and stuff, and the teachers are all there, saying, be an accountant or be this or be that or the other. So I have to kind of talk with them and say, well, is that such a good idea?
Yeah.
And really make them think about things, because if they want to go to university, and these days most kids are funneled into a university, which they end up coming out in debt and working in McDonald's. So I am trying to put that into their heads that A, I won't bail them out if they do that, and B, they better think long and hard about it and maybe take a year off first or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that difficulty of financing education and whatnot is a big debate over here as well. The cost of education, the level to which student debt has soared. It's over $1 trillion now of student debt, and I think something like 30% delinquency rate as we speak on those loans. So the how that education problem is going to resolve itself over time is another one of those big questions. Monsta, what about you? You had a university education, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it personally did me a lot of good. I working in a job that doesn't need a degree, so essentially you just wasted a bunch of years doing something that hasn't really helped. And you join the job, you find a bunch of people in your job who've also got degrees and in the same boat, as it were. So I think the main question that kids have to ask is university for me? I feel maybe if they want to go and work in the real world, get a job, do something you like, get an apprenticeship if you have to, and just see whether you need a degree or not, because it's a big decision. But I think the problem with these kind of questions about jobs and careers is if you're looking at it from a collapse angle, you have to start thinking of timelines, really, because do you think collapse is going to happen in 5 years? It's going to happen in 10 years, because if it happens in a longer term, like 15, 20 years, then perhaps an education would be useful. But
we have no choice but to have business as usual. We can't do anything else.
No.
See, Jason can't take his kids out into the wild and live in a tent, so he has business as usual with his children.
Yeah.
You bring up your children like normal kids, don't you? As I did, or try.
But I suppose that you could. Yeah, go on,
I
Jason.
was just going to say, I mean, I had an interesting conversation just earlier today, because as I said, I spent the day making cider, and we've got some old oak barrels, and I was talking to this guy about where he got the barrels from, and he was telling me that in Scotland, where they make the whiskey, the barrels are extremely expensive, handcrafted, and they found out that there was just one guy left making them, these proper expensive barrels, because if you fill a barrel, a 50-gallon barrel with single malt whiskey, and then the barrel is defective, you've just lost a lot of money. So there's only one guy left making these barrels, and then he was facing retirement, and he could not find an apprentice, could not find a single person willing to learn how to make these barrels, because of course the education system would tell kids that that's a kind of career that's old-fashioned, it's on the way out. Nobody would do that anymore. Buy the barrels from China or whatever. Well, apparently now they use plastic ones, put oak chips in to make the flavour. So I mean, it's just a question of priorities, isn't it? Where do we educate our kids? What direction do we think the future is going to take us?
I think the other problem, though, is it's not just about the lack of opportunities. It's just like, where is the money these days? A lot of the money is in banking and other industries. Like, they say, yeah, we need engineers, we need X, Y, and Z. But a lot of the time, these jobs, they don't have stability, or the pay is shit, honestly. And they say, okay, we need engineers, but they pay them a pittance. And then they say, look, nobody wants to do engineering jobs, but if you're going to work that many years, you want something to be guaranteed. And I think that's also another aspect. A lot of the jobs that we do need, they don't have a sufficient compensation for. I mean, what do you think of that, Jason? Do you think that's true, or?
I think that we'll probably always need engineers. It just depends what kind of materials they're working with.
Yeah, but I'm just saying the jobs that we do need the most, we don't pay them enough, and the jobs that we don't need, we pay them millions. You see what I mean?
Well, there are
that's the finance. That's the finance question, and the fact that the real money to be made is coming from the Ponzi scheme, and from being on the inside track there and getting those jobs in as traders and so forth, and trying to sell worthless securities to a bigger fool and all the rest of that. Whereas what you would call the so-called productive end of society is getting the shaft. One of my pet peeves is about that idea of engineering and so forth. In the last 30 years, that corridor, if you will, that conveyor belt to success, becoming an IT professional and so forth or whatever, it seemed like the way to go. And so now you continue to have these people going to school, paying exorbitant amounts of tuition to learn how to become an electrical engineer or comp sci, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that those type of industries are collapsing. And so you've got more people graduating with those type of degrees that people thought were so worthwhile, but now are becoming essentially worthless. They'll be worthless in the future. Yeah, some forms of engineering probably will be useful in the future. Civil engineering, I could see, building bridges, fixing bridges, whatever. But the types of stuff that people think today still believe are, good future prospects are probably not such great future prospects. Another one is in the medical field, the health field. We're churning out tons of doctors and nurses and so forth, but who the fuck can afford health care the way it's priced out? And they expect to keep getting high incomes from that, but that also is unlikely to continue. So that all revolves around the monetary system, and how that's going. But to get back to England itself and its relationship to the European Union, besides Jeremy Corbyn, over here in this side of the pond, Nigel Farage has gotten quite a decent amount of play. I'm kind of curious to what you guys think of Nigel and his viewpoint, especially in terms of the immigration issue and how immigration is going to be affecting England as we move ahead here. Norman, you want to take the lead on the immigration question?
Yeah, I mean, Farage has tapped into a lot of primeval fears, I think, about invading hordes and such like. But the fact remains that yes, we can accommodate immigrants we can accommodate so many thousands of immigrants for a while, as long as our economy is buoyant. But when our economy ceases to be buoyant and productive and all the rest of it, and we can't accommodate them and we can't feed them, what happens then? Because if we get 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 immigrants here, they are still going to look to us for some sort of support. And the whole of the UK is oil dependent for its food and its general economy. Because when we were talking about we were talking about oil input a few minutes ago, it's still there. You cannot get away from the energy problem, no matter what problem you're dealing with. You always come back to, can we feed ourselves? Can we support ourselves? Can we support an immigrant population on the energy that we have? And I don't think we can. And it might be 10 years down the line, it might be 15 years down the line, it might be 20, but we shall still run into that problem because the country will hit poverty, and the immigrant population are going to be very pleased about it.
Well, it's always the immigrants that and the poorest that hit first. Jason, how do you see the problem with immigration developing over time in England?
Well, I mean, there's about 60+ million people living in the UK. and I don't think we could even support half or even a quarter of them if we had to kind of be self-sufficient. So the idea of bringing in more and more people all the time is crazy from an ecological point of view. But what's been happening in recent years is the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, and various other bodies like that have been all in favour of bringing in more and more and more immigrants, primarily from Eastern Europe, because they will work long hours for very cheap wages. So they're able to make pretty good money off them. And most, you know, this might be a little bit controversial, but most British people don't want to work those jobs. And if I go out around here in Cornwall, all the fields are full of Romanians picking all the produce. I don't ever see any English people doing that. So what's happening with the popularity of Nigel Farage is that his party, UKIP, has recognised this, and they recognise that the average kind of Joe on the lower income kind of end of the spectrum realises that their jobs are being directly threatened by massive immigration, and he's tapped into that fear. And of course there's all sorts of strange people associated with his party, but nevertheless it is a real fear of a lot of people, and they feel, I suppose, frustrated that they can't voice a concern without being called a lunatic.
A lunatic or a racist or whatever,
Or whatever, you know.
especially because you know, so much of the population that is in the process of migration is Muslim. So with that in mind, Mansa, you know, how do you view you know, that problem cropping up in England vis-a-vis the Syrian refugees and so forth, all the people from the Middle East that are now trying to migrate?
I mean, the thing is, there's a range. I mean, the Syria problem is quite significant, but I think generally speaking, there's been quite a high level of migration. I mean, for example, it's the net migration into England has generally been around 250,000 to 3,000 a year, 300,000 that is. So, you know, a lot of it I think comes from the EU, and this is why people like Nigel Farage are quite popular, because you've got all these immigrants from the EU, which we can do nothing about stopping because of EU laws about free movement, and if they're not stealing their jobs, they're depressing the wages of the lower working class. So I think that's one of the things that people, they want to step out of the euro, and I think this is one of the big drivers for the referendum in 2017. As for the whole Islamic thing, I think the whole business with ISIS and how they're promoting all their propaganda on the internet and social media has, you know, concerned people. I don't think it's made like I don't think it's one of the biggest fears anyway that is in England, but it's there definitely, and I think the main fear is more to do with letting in so many Syrians, because there's just a flood of them, and in that regard, Cameron's saying 20,000 between now and 2020, which isn't really a lot in my eyes, because that's like 4,000 a year. So whether that comes true or not, I find it kind of hard to believe. I think there will be more sneaking in, but how many more is the big question. I mean, what are your thoughts on this whole refugee crisis, Norman? Do you think it's going to get worse, or do you think they'll just draw the line somewhere, or what do you think?
It's going to get worse, as Jason said. We've got 63 million people now in a country where we cannot feed ourselves without oil input. We are buying our food from external sources. That's what we do. To feed the British population requires food input. We have to buy it in from abroad. Now, if that means disappears, if we can't afford to buy our food, we're going to have various factions of people in the country demanding food. And food is the critical factor. You know, you demand food above everything else, food and water. You can get away with it. You can do without a lot of other stuff, but you can't do without food. And if you've got X thousands of Syrians or Ethiopians or Polish workers or whatever it is, they're going to see themselves as somehow in dire straits and have no food available and have no resources available, and we won't be able to supply it. The country won't be able to supply it. And well, that's when trouble will start.
I guess the question is, where, you know, at what point, you know, amongst ourselves, you know, looking at the problem, realizing that it's a resource constraint problem, realizing that the food production system is oil based, and so as oil becomes too expensive or too difficult to extract and so forth, that the supply of food is going to drop, and therefore the population has to drop, all the rest of that. The question is, when does this knowledge or concept become, you know, realized by population at large, and when, you know, eventually people are going to say, no more. We can't take any more refugees, no more migration, and they're going to try to put up walls at borders and fences and so forth, like they're already trying to do down in Hungary, trying to stop the flow. But of course,
it won't happen until the food supermarket shelves are looking empty. It's as critical as that. When food runs into short supply, people will realize why, and will actually demand to know why. And if we can't afford to buy it, then the supermarkets won't have food in them.
I think there's a particular conceit here in Britain that nothing bad can ever happen to us.
Well, exactly. Yes, that's what I mean.
Again and again, it's like bad things happen elsewhere. They never happen
to other people.
Yeah.
Exactly. Bad things happen elsewhere, and we've had a good run here. We've had a very good run. But prosperity has been with us in the UK in a general sense for less than 100 years. Because if you're talking about energy, my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather mined the coal in the first place to make the country run. That's what they did, and I'm sitting on their prosperity. Personally, I mean, personally, I am sitting on the prosperity of my antecedents, because I've been down mines and I've seen it being dug out, and that's where the energy of the country came from.
Yeah. It's like gamblers who've had a good run; they don't know when their luck will run out.
Well, actually, going back to Jeremy Corbyn on this one, I don't know if you've heard him talking about it, but he is addressing energy issues in his speeches. And one of the things that he says he will do is reopen all the coal mines, or at least a lot of them. And and there's something apparently called clean coal.
Yeah.
That's the energy policy.
It's reopening the coal mines. I know how coal mines work. I personally, I couldn't be a coal miner because I'm too lazy, but I know how they work. You cannot open a coal mine. I mean, if I'd gone down the coal mine, my father would have taught me how to do it personally. He would have stood over me and made sure I stayed alive. And that his father did it to him, and his father did it to him. They stood over them.
Maybe they think they can strip mine it. Use the heavy equipment and just tear apart whole mountains.
They call them sunshine miners, and that's happening. You do get sunshine miners. But we've only got 2 coal mines left, I think, in UK. And there used to be hundreds of them. And you cannot reopen coal mines. You see, this is what I meant about Corbyn's airy-fairy ideas. He wants to give students free education for as long as they want it. He wants to provide money for people to spend on stuff they want. He wants quantitative easing for people, which means giving them money to buy what they want. And, of course, money is, in fact, a token of energy. So you can't print money to do that.
But you can understand why that's popular.
This is the Corbyn problem.
Well,
I do think, though,
the understanding also isn't there that that the coal itself is losing value, right? I mean, you look at commodities across the board, whether it's coal, oil, whatever, they're not becoming more valuable in a sense because there's too much demand destruction. The people who use that stuff, that use the energy, don't have the credit to buy it.
No,
so
credit.
You're not going to make more money by reopening coal mines, even if you could do it.
No,
it doesn't work that way.
No.
I'm sorry, I rolled over you.
I think the main thing, though, is, yeah, this is quite a funny idea of Corbyn, that the whole coal, because never mind that it's too cheap to probably be economical, it's the whole emissions things and how that relates to Europe. That's not going to help if they mine coal. But I think generally speaking, the energy planning in this country is at best you can describe as muddled. You have Corbyn on the one hand saying coal, but then Cameron saying we should start fracking, and that will solve our oil problems. And to me, that's almost as fanciful as the coal. Almost. It's not quite as bad, but it's just the same thing. They just think, oh, we do this, it'll be fixed. They've cut their subsidies to photovoltaic and wind farms, and it's just like, where do they think this energy has come from? I think there's a real detachment. There's no, Norman keeps mentioning the energy problem, but these politicians, there's no energy, doesn't come into their brain at all.
You never hear it mentioned. Very rarely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's the big one.
If energy is mentioned by politicians, it's mentioned in some utterly unrealistic scenario, whatever it is. But one interesting question does come to my mind, which again is getting specific to jolly old England and talking about coal. Of course, we know coal is, whether they say that they can burn it cleanly or not, it's fairly dirty business to burn it. And it's going to produce carbon dioxide no matter what. And so we come around to the issue of climate change. And, I'm curious from all of you guys if you feel like you're witnessing climate change in your areas around England. How is the climate situation affecting where you live in particular? Jason, you want to pick that one up first?
Well, I've only actually lived in this particular area for about 2.5 years, but talking to other people who've lived there for their whole lives, they are saying it's changed markedly. I mean, the winters are a lot colder now than they used to be. I mean, you'll hear anecdotes of people used to wear t-shirt and shorts all year round here, but now they have to put on long trousers in the winter. So it's changing in that respect. But we are getting a lot more storms. And the big thing to note, of course, is that when a weather pattern comes over these islands, it tends to hang around for a lot longer because the climate conveyor belt system from the Atlantic has slowed down. So we've just had about 3 weeks of hot weather here, and this afternoon it's just changed to bad, cold, windy, rain weather, and we can expect that for another 2 or 3 weeks now. Whereas before, it used to change every couple of days. That's one thing that I've certainly noticed in the last few years.
Well, you are getting water at least, which some places aren't, but which is too much water sometimes, right? Norman, you've been around a few more years than the rest of us here. So how do you see?
Living in the centre of the country, I couldn't say that there's been a critical change in the weather that I've noticed that I can say, oh well, this summer or last summer we have lovely summers, we have wet summers, but sitting in the centre of the country, I personally, I can't, I couldn't say one way or the other. It's weather just turns up where I live. There is no, but I can quite see that Cornwall gets the brunt of it. My sister lives in a similar place. She lives in the southwest corner of Ireland, which is very similar to Cornwall, and she's saying the same thing as you are. But that living right on the sea edge, you do get the worst of it or the best of it, I think. But I couldn't say sitting in the Midlands that we're getting good, bad, different weather in any distinct way.
All right. Well, just one more topic, I think, here before we wrap it up today, which is finance and English finance. Just like here in America with Wall Street, you've got over there the City of London, which is a finance capital of the world, along with Wall Street. And so a lot of the wealth in London and the wealth of England in general comes as a result of that financial leadership, that position of being a credit creator. How do you guys see that the City of London holding up over the next few years? The English pound, will it continue to maintain its value, and so forth? Where do you see English money going, and the English financial system? Jason, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the City of London is our big kind of casino money earner. So the government is going to do whatever it can to preserve that for as long as it possibly can. Because, I mean, basically they don't produce anything, but they produce a lot of money, whatever money is, And most people have a general idea that, oh, we have to keep the city going, and they don't like the fact that these bankers get paid huge bonuses and they spend it on yachts and stuff. But they kind of received wisdom that they get through the press, is that it's a good thing overall, and it allows us to keep having a, to have a lifestyle that we haven't really earned. So I think they'll do whatever they can to preserve that. And there are some very clever people working there, unfortunately. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I found myself stuck in London for the day. I hadn't been there for a long time, and I used to live in London. So I thought, what should I do? Because I was going around researching some places for my novel that I'm writing, The Seat of Mars, which takes place in London, and that's exactly what happens. The government tries to preserve the financial district, and I'll give a little bit of the plot away here, that they actually build a wall around it and end up moving in there so that they can run their various Ponzi schemes at the expense of everyone else. But just walking around there, I mean, it's a very eerie place because it is about 1 square mile. It's skyscrapers, but it's completely deserted outside of office hours. There's like literally nobody there. Maybe you get the odd bus going through. But during working hours, there are 35,000 finance workers there. So it's a very strange place. It's kind of quite eerie, in my opinion. And as for the pound, I think, well, you never know with currencies. I mean, it might be perceived as a safe haven, so it would go up in value, but it could equally go down in value just as fast.
Yeah, that whole currency question of, which currency is going to be the last man standing is one we run into all the time on the diner. And is the dollar going to crash? Is the yuan or renminbi going to crash? Japanese yen going to go down first? Who's going to lose it first? Norman, you got thoughts on the City of London or currencies?
I think the pound will lose it last, because England is seen in the last resort as a stable environment to be Hence, you've got your Russians, Chinese, um, um, various Saudi people coming over, putting their money into London because they think it's a safe haven. Ultimately, of course, it won't be, but I think it'll be the last to go down. But but London itself, as Jason says, it doesn't actually produce anything. And I've walked through the city myself, and it is just just empty canyons after hours. It is a very strange place. It is totally empty. There's nothing there. You know, it's a very odd sensation to be there. But it is a place that produces nothing. And I think the economics of London itself are that it needs 2.5 times the area of the UK to provide its resources to survive as a viable city. It needs that much land area as an energy input, but they just churn money out from one end to the other.
Sorry, Norman.
No, sorry, carry on.
If I could just add a little point to that. What's actually happening in London, the actual city itself, where however many million people live, is it's being turned into a real estate Ponzi bubble. So a lot of the actual real Londoners that live in London are being shipped out. They're being brought out by the huge rise, the insane house price inflation, and the people that are living in kind of council accommodation, they're being shipped out to places like Cornwall here against their will. So it's almost like a social cleansing that's going on of London.
Almost, my partner and I talk about it because she's involved in building and property and stuff like that, and it's almost Dickensian because you're getting people crammed into smaller and smaller spaces. The people you need to service to make the place run, the cleaners, the bus drivers, and people like that, to make the city actually function, are having to live in smaller and smaller spaces because they can't find any accommodation at all. It is so unaffordable. How anyone lives in the centre of London, I cannot imagine.
Well, I actually saw an article about a fellow who went apartment shopping, apartment hunting, and in London, and saw an ad for a room, a sort of share arrangement. But what this so-called room turned out to be was a bed that was wedged underneath the stairwell, in basically a closet.
That's exactly how they used to live in Dickensian times. Exactly like that. They lived in corners, on stairs, under stairs, in little box rooms, anywhere at all.
Well, you don't become a place to park your wealth for the Chinese and for the Saudis. I mean, there's a certain time of year in the summer where all the rich young men from the Middle East, they all arrive in London on Boeing 747s with their cars in the back of these planes, and they're like gold-plated Ferraris and stuff.
Yeah.
They drive around this area in London, and people actually go there to watch them, to look at them.
I've watched them. I've seen them. It's a crazy situation.
It's Knightsbridge near the Hilton.
Yeah,
that's where they do it.
Yeah, well, that that again goes back to the wealth disparity and the distribution of wealth problem that goes on, and that as time goes by, I don't think that's going to be tolerated so well.
Get revolution, don't you?
Yeah, you'll start to see gold-plated Ferraris being set on fire.
They'll just buy another one, though.
Yeah, well, for a while. That's until the Ferrari factory goes out of business. But at any rate, all right. Well, this has been a real good discussion today on the situation going on around the UK. Before we go, I'd like to, as usual, give everybody a chance to make a closing statement about where you think, in this case, where you think England is going, and where you think we've got a future ahead of us, or what our future is and how long that future is. So let me start with Norman on this one. Norman, how do you think it's going to go for the UK, and over what timeline?
I think there's a real danger that over the next 4 or 5 years we're going to become disillusioned with the Conservative government, and because they can't do anything to solve our financial problems, we're going to vote Corbyn in, and then Corbyn is going to bring in his fairy tale economics and think that all he has to do is print money, and that will lead to the ultimate bankruptcy of the country. He thinks you can just provide free everything, that he can reopen the coal mines, that he can renationalise the railways, he can provide free education for anybody who wants it, anything at all. You can have anything you want, providing you're a pleasant sort of character and of socialist inclination, and that is going to bankrupt the country, and that will be about 2022, 23, something like that. But again, it's all this is just guesswork. But I do think that Cameron's politics won't solve our problems, and people are going to look to Corbyn or somebody like him to provide a solution. But of course, it isn't a problem that can be solved by politics. It's a problem to be solved by energy. And I think you've got the same problem in the USA, and I think you're going to have the same problem around Europe. Because Germany is apparently rich, but if Germany hasn't got anybody to sell their pretty products to, then Germany's stuffed as well, isn't they?
Yeah, you're only as rich as your what your debtors can pay up on. You know, they say if you borrow $1,000, the bank owns you, but if you borrow $100 billion, you own the bank, and so forth. So you have that problem going on. Jason, any final thoughts on where you think things are going for England?
Well, I don't agree that we might become bankrupt. I think we already are bankrupt. We just haven't realised it yet.
Well, yeah.
For me, the big one,
Yeah.
the big thing to watch is fracking, because the government is absolutely determined to go ahead with it. Because we don't really have fracking at the moment. Maybe 1 or 2 test wells, but that's it. But the government is determined. David Cameron keeps saying that it's going to happen, whatever. So my opinion is that what they're trying to do, even though the energy return, what you get from fracking gas or whatever, is very marginal, I think they're going to try and push it ahead anyway, because it would just be the latest Ponzi scheme that the moneyed classes can actually make money out of, big time. So I think they will do it for those reasons. But the massive difference between the UK and the USA is that the UK is very, very densely populated, and most of these fields, they are underneath people's houses, they're underneath towns, and most people are vehemently opposed to it, almost willing to lay down their lives to stop it. So we've got a situation where most people are willing to almost die to stop this, and the government is saying they're going to do it anyway. So what could it lead to? I mean, civil war? Who knows? I just can't see how we can have a way out of this. I just can't see it. But that's what I imagine in my book, Seed of Mars.
That's what Seed of Mars is focusing on. All right, Mansa, your thoughts from your perch in the UK there? Where do you see things going for the country?
Well, these questions are always a bit tricky because everything is so connected. If Europe collapses, I'm not sure that England would last much longer. But on the general level, I think England will last a little longer than most places, just because of the fact that it's like one of the financial centers of the world, and a lot of people, including the non-English, have faith in the sterling pound. So I think for some time they will do okay, but again, this is highly dependent on what's going on in the global economy. But the other difference I would say, though, is once the collapse does happen, because England doesn't have energy, resources, they won't be able to kickstart on the same level as, say, America, Russia, or places like that who have actually got substantial energy resources to draw into. So I feel the standard of living will drop probably quite dramatically from a material standpoint anyway, and then it will not really recover on the same level. So that's when you will get a lot of problems. As for things like fracking, that will be a source of tension, but I think due to population density, price of land, lack of incentives to people who own the land to give it up, I find it's not going to make a lot of money, especially if oil prices remain at $40 a barrel. So that could possibly be a bit of a palaver if it ever went through. So that's generally my thoughts on England, but again, making a timeline on this is difficult.
Yeah, the timeline questions are always the hardest ones.
You can never get
And picking out when things are going to happen. And it's to an extent, it's a fool's game to be doing that. But you do have a direction that things are going, and you have to position yourself as best you can for that direction. But of course, as Norman said, you're also trapped into doing business as usual, sending your kids to school, making your daily wage if you still have a job, and so forth. So it's quite difficult to know exactly what you need to do. And but that's why we're here on the Diner, and 22 billion energy slaves, and why Norman wrote his book, The End of More, because it's important to understand the issues if you are going to make informed decisions. And with that in mind, I'd also like to let everybody know that we just launched a new website, in this case a Reddit subweb, called Our Global Collapse. And Our Global Collapse is a place for you to drop news links which are related to all issues collapse, whether they're economic or geopolitical, and so forth. And we hope you'll stop by there and join us, and inform us of something that you read that is apropos to our topic of discussion. And we will be back again, assuming the internet is still up and I am still alive, here on the Collapse Cafe and Doomstead Diner. Thanks again to my guests, Norman Paget and Jason Heppenstall, and my co-host, Monsta. And that's all the doom. This time until next time, here on the Doomstead Diner. Bye-bye.